The 5 Minutes podcast is for educational purposes only. The views expressed by hosts and guests are their own, not necessarily their employers. Advice discussed is general advice. We promote ethical discussions, not illegal activities. Listen responsibly. G'day everyone, welcome back to the 5 Minutes podcast. My name's Max, as always, and I'm joined by Flynn, so let's get right into it.
So BSides Sydney was over the weekend. Unfortunately, I couldn't join it myself, but Max, I heard you were there. What were the main highlights of the day?
Yeah, so it was a fairly good day, except for the weather, where the weather was shitty, but aside from that, it wasn't too bad. I found that quite a few of the talks when it came to ransomware and kind of threat hunting were a little bit surface level, but it was still a good sort of event to go to. Big highlight was the final keynote speech by Amy Nightingale on RF hacking. So it was a talk kind of encapsulating all of these different parts of radio frequency and how you can disrupt them. There was a cool bit on car keys. So she pulled out an antenna and had some people point their car keys to the antenna. And what I was able to do is you were able to see a representation of the actual signal being sent from your car key and being picked up by the receiver. So a cool little shout out to Amy Nightingale. That was an excellent sort of talk.
So that sounds like some really cool research. Does anyone need to be worried about this happening to their car, do you think?
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, it'd be fairly easy to sit there in a van, right? Wait for someone to unlock their car, capture that signal, and then replicate it, then send it back out to the car to unlock it. So that's definitely a bit of a worry. Your car does actually rotate the keys that it sends every 3 or 4 times that you send it. So if you're ever worried that someone's going to steal it, just unlock it and relock it a few times to reset that key.
Or maybe we steer away from central locking. We go back to the good old days. So key in the door.
Yeah. That's a good one.
So were there anything else? Any other highlights of the day?
I'd say that was probably the big one. The CTF was there. I'm sure that was fun, but I didn't really get super involved into it. I know some people won some prizes, so go on them. But kind of while we're on the topic of conferences, I thought it would be a good thing to bring up. I went to a conference a little while ago, I won't say which one. There was a panel with a few different security professionals, and as a bit of kind of a comedy kind of aspect of one of the responses someone on the panel gave, they casually brought up some vulnerabilities that their company had. And they also did not mention that they were resolved in any way. They just said, oh yeah, we've had this, and this is a vulnerability that we've had to struggle with, and it can be a real pain sometimes. And they did not bring up if it had been patched. They were kind of insinuating that it hadn't actually been patched. So just a little thing while we're on the topic of conferences, if you're ever on a panel, try to be careful about what you say, because people can be recording in the audience. And, you know, if I was a black hat attacker, I would definitely be going to security conferences under an alias and listening into people talking about their organizations in that way.
Yeah, I suppose it's an easy way to catch people off guard. Like, nerves are probably pretty high up on the stage, and, you know, they have a set list of things they're expecting questions to come at them. And if you kind of steer it in a weird way, I'm sure you can probably catch a lot of people off guard.
Yeah. Speaking of panels, so Flynn and I would have been on the panel for the ASD branch meeting as well. See how we go with that one. But, you know, as time of recording, we haven't done it yet. But
hopefully we don't leak any vulnerabilities for our company.
Yes, you can send us an email if you found that we gave away a critical vulnerability at the panel and we didn't realize.
So there's been a new ransomware strategy. It's quite an interesting one, because it's almost not horrible for a lot of people, because what they're doing is they're finding vulnerable companies, and then, of course, double extortion's a massive thing nowadays. You know, back in the day, it used to be they just encrypt your files and then that was it. But now it's, well, we're going to encrypt your files and then we're also going to sell your data, because, you know, people will just restore from backups and there's no threat anymore. What we have seen recently is that they're actually threatening to report to the regulators, which is interesting. Obviously, it's horrible to be extorted, but it's almost beneficial for certain people. They're like, oh, they're actually going to regulators to say when somebody is vulnerable. It's quite an interesting situation, and I just found it quite funny when I was reading up on it the other day.
Right, so what they're doing is they're compromising a company, then they're demanding a ransom, and then also threatening to go to the regulator at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So if it's a vulnerability that that should be covered under a specific standard. So let's say APRA covers it under CPS 234. If they know that that's not covered, they'll go to APRA and say, hey, this company is actually vulnerable, which is, it's quite interesting. And I can't imagine being on the receiving end of it. I'd imagine it's probably horrible.
Yeah, well, you're getting hit with extortion, and then also the regulator's gone breathing down your neck. What are you doing?
Yeah. It's going to be like quadruple extortion. We're going to be double digits extortions.
So just bringing it back to conferences, there was a real interesting one at BSides this year where someone from the audience had a question to one of the people talking on ransomware, and I don't think the person talking quite understood the question, or maybe the question wasn't obvious enough, but he said, if we get hit with ransomware, are there resources online that we can use to learn how to talk to these threat actors? And the right response to this question, which the person presenting did not say, is do not respond to threat actors on your own.
Yeah, we've gone through this in a previous episode as well.
They will wreck you. They will absolutely smack you if you respond on your own and you try and outsmart them. Go through someone else who's a professional in the sense and being a negotiator. Don't try and do it on your own.
But yeah, it's been a crazy couple of weeks in cyber. We had the DP World breach, ransomware attack. We also had the Optus, which wasn't cyber related, but was crazy in the tech sphere and was crazy how it even happened in the first place. So also the Australian government came out with the cyber strategy, which we're actually going to go over in another episode completely just because there's a lot to unpack there. No major surprises we've seen so far in it. Another thing that came up was the ASD threat report, which actually is interesting because we were talking about local governments and vulnerabilities there. It actually came out that local government is the second most targeted industry in Australia. So I believe it was 30% was federal government at first, and then 13% for local government. So there's a bit of a follow-up from our previous episode.
And going on that, right, so that's only going on reports made by the local governments where they've either publicly come out, like they haven't been forced to disclose these.
Yeah, so as we went over in the previous episode, the PIP Act isn't in place till November 28th, which as of the time of recording is tomorrow. So it'll be live once this episode is out. That's going to be a big shakeup. So 12.9, who knows where that number will be next year. Something to keep in mind, these numbers may not be entirely accurate. As Max said, certain instances will not be reported in general. And some maybe look quite inflated. Like I can't remember the exact figure, but if you look at the previous years and you go to this year, it shows a significant increase in attacks. May not necessarily be the case. It's just reported attacks. Especially with some massive breaches over the year, like Medibank and stuff like that. Some people may have been more comfortable coming forward with a smaller attack because they might think it's not as big a deal. But it's important to keep an eye on the statistics. A couple of other interesting ones. Medium-sized businesses were actually suffered the biggest loss per attack. So small businesses was around $45,000 per attack. Large businesses was $71,000. And medium businesses was $97,000. So it's significantly increased.
So that's a real interesting one. You'd think almost that larger companies, you could demand a greater ransom from them, but I also suppose that they have
better incident management probably.
Yeah.
Hard to say just off that statistic alone. But we know that small and medium businesses are a major target for cyber criminals. And that is something that's also covered in the cyber strategy, which we'll go over in a later episode. Also interesting, don't think it's particularly important, but Queensland was the most targeted state for some reason. Me and Max are Blues supporters, so that's a win in our books. Ransomware itself, the most targeted was professional, scientific, and technical services, which makes sense because IP and stuff like that. Followed by retail, manufacturing, healthcare, and construction. So those not too surprising there. But yeah, those were the major big statistics that I found really interesting out of the threat report. As I said, who knows how inflated or deflated these figures are. It'll be particularly interesting, the local government one in the next year, I think. So a bit of a fun one. Me and Max were talking about this before. It's been around for a while, but how to beat AI face recognition. So me and Max were going a bit back and forth before the episode. I was saying that it's not actually that effective. Basically, face recognition's everywhere nowadays. If you walk into the Star Casino, face instantly knows that you're in that. If you've been banned from there, they will instantly escort you out.
Yep.
One way that people try to get around this is particular shirts. I think it's a particular encoding within the shirt that makes it so it just can't recognize your face.
Yeah.
From practical examples I've seen, it doesn't work that well. Like, it's very iffy, it's very spotty.
Yeah.
But was this something that was coming at the conference as well?
A little bit. So there was a talk at BSides about certain ways to beat more AI-based facial recognition. Also, it's worth saying, man, we really got blindsided here, allowing sort of facial recognition in this country, the wide amount of it which has been allowed. It feels like it doesn't seem, from my perspective, that there's enough knowledge around how this data's being stored and regularly being used everywhere now, almost under our nose. We've gone through.
Yeah, we know that in Australia we have a really big problem with storing and collecting data as well. So it's probably often the case that maybe there is a need for this data, but it should be deleted. It's really highly sensitive.
And I don't really hear anything about it. So, I mean, a part of me is a bit annoyed that we've, been able to let it go through so much. And I don't even know any of the restrictions on facial recognition. Are there any saying that you can't use it?
I don't think so, to be honest. So GDPR's a big no-no with that. Yeah. But in Australia, there are some weird privacy laws. Like, I could be misquoting this, but you basically don't have a lot of privacy when you're in public. Like, you can take a photo, and if it's in public, you're fine.
I guess that's all right. But I mean, if you're in someone, say you're in a casino or in a restaurant or a bar, there's also not really any level of privacy there.
No, I don't think so. During the COVID times where conspiracies were really high, I remember there was a lot of people talking about face recognition. I think there's a lot of it about your phone and stuff like that with authentication. Yeah. Like, oh no, you shouldn't be doing this, and Australia's starting to do it. It's like, no, this technology's been around forever. The Star Casino's been doing this for years and years and years. Yeah. It's not new.
Yeah. In my opinion, it's a little bit worrying. I feel like there's ways to stop people from coming in and ways to ban people effectively without storing facial recognition data and then plugging in AI that's able to pick it up in real time. It just seems a little bit to me like, we may come to regret this in the future.
Yeah, who knows what the future holds.
Yeah, so jumping it back to the conference a little bit, there was some stuff. It was some of the t-shirts, they did bring that up, but they also brought up there's little sticky black squares that you can put on your face that make the AI think that the face it's kind of seeing is an artifact or it's some other kind of technique, but I'll have to look into it a bit more. It seems like there are
QR code.
Yeah, QR code. Yeah, just get some face painting. Go to the local fair and get a face paint of a QR code. But no, it seems like while the facial recognition is getting better, I'd be very surprised if the defenses aren't getting better for this kind of stuff as well. Also, right after COVID, there's not really any kind of public disdain for wearing a mask wherever you are. So if you're worried that you might be going somewhere that has facial recognition and you care about it, you're probably more than welcome to wear a mask there.
That's a good point. Yeah, in other AI news, so GPT, obviously people can take GPT and use it in their own models. I think it's OpenAI, I may have to check, but there's basically a GPT store that's going to be rolling out soon. It may even be out by the time this is up, which isn't exactly new. You can go online and get GPT, any type of model that does a specific thing, but it'll be interesting seeing this more widespread.
So there's a website called There's an AI for that, and it kind of, any kind of task that you want to be done by AI, it gives you a model or a website that you can go through and get it done for you. So what the store seems to be doing to me is they're trying to, create a central sort of market, a central place where you can go for this and try and sort of snuff out their competitors a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. My bigger worry is just seeing the widespread nature of where AI is going. We've gone over before about how putting it into things that don't need to be put into. Yeah, the future's going to be interesting. Mostly speculation at the moment, but there was also a lot of drama in OpenAI in general. Their CEO, what's his name? Sam Altman was basically fired, then he was rehired, and then half the board was fired. Speculation about, was it Q-Star?
Yeah, there was a leak for one of their new, I don't know if it was even if they had created a model or if someone leaked the framework they were using called Q-Star, which seems to be a combination of Q, which is already a framework, an algorithm, and A star, which is like a problem-solving, in a sense, for a problem-solving algorithm as well.
Yeah, we don't know too much around it at the moment. A lot of speculation, as we said, so we may just wait till a later date to discuss that more. You know, if you believe every conspiracy theory online, it's quite scary.
Yeah, well, you're going to go insane if you do that as well. But it's never a good sign if the leadership is throwing stones at each other and ousting each other.
Exactly, especially in such a powerful company like OpenAI and a technology that's so scary.
Yeah, it's not a good sign. And like, if you talk to me personally, I don't like the idea of one company having a massive swing or sway in power and control over such an important asset, right? And have that the amount of computing power that they have at their disposal now, partnering with Microsoft. Some could say that by this board reshuffling and Sam coming back in from, you know, a lot of the company requesting him back in, he could even have full control of this company without us really knowing it, and he could really do whatever he wants. Which, if he's a good person, fantastic. But you know, I'm always a bit of a skeptic. It could be worrying if he has some other interests.
Yeah, it's definitely worrying. As I said, it's hard to say what's happening. It's hard to say if this is good, if this is bad, but at the very least, it's scary.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Just a reminder that the Cyber Minutes podcast is for educational purposes only. The views expressed by hosts and guests are their own, not necessarily their employers. Advice discussed is general advice. We promote ethical discussions, not illegal activities. Have a cybersecurity question? Send an email to cyberminutespodcast@gmail.com, as we'd love to answer it. Stay cyber safe.